Hello and welcome to The Inner Path, Beyond the I Am. What you're about to hear is not a script or a concept. It is part of a real conversation that took place during my spiritual journey. This dialogue came out of my own seeking, my own experience, and it reflects my attempt to go deeper into silence. These are questions I ask sincerely, not just for understanding, but to uncover the silence within. I'm sharing this from my journey because the path can feel so solitary, yet we're all seekers together. If it touches you, sit with it as living inquiry, stay for the reflective question at the end, and share your journey in the comments. I'd love to hear. The fact of the ego rising from the self and forgetting it is birth. Is this sentence saying the ego is the self, or born from the self? The sentence suggests the ego is born from the self, but is not identical to it. In Advaita Vedanta, the self is the ultimate reality, while the ego is a superimposition due to ignorance. The ego arises from the self as a result of identification with the body, mind, and senses, and in doing so, it forgets its true nature. This is akin to how a wave arises from the ocean. The wave is not separate from the ocean, but its identification as an individual entity creates the illusion of separateness. Similarly, the ego's sense of individuality is what leads to the cycle of birth and rebirth. This understanding aligns with the teachings of texts like the Upanishads and Advaita, works such as Upadesha Sahasri and Atma Bodha, where it is repeatedly emphasized that self-realization occurs when the ego dissolves back into the self. Would you like a reference from one of the texts you've uploaded? Yes, the idea that the ego arises from the self but forgets its source is supported in Upadesha Sahasri. It describes how the ego is merely a reflection of the self, similar to a face appearing in a mirror. The pure self is distinct from its reflection, the ego, just as a real face is different from its image in the mirror. As it imitates the mirror, the reflection of a face is different from the face. The face, which does not depend on the mirror for its existence, is also different from its reflection. Similarly, the reflection of the self in the ego is also regarded as different from the pure self, like that of the face, which is different from its own. Furthermore, the text explains that the ego appears conscious only due to the proximity of the self, meaning the ego has no independent reality. On account of the constant proximity of the conscious self, the ego also appears to be conscious. Hence the two things, viz., oneself, and things related to oneself that are denoted by the words I and mine originate. This means the ego is not the true self, but is a projection due to ignorance. When ignorance is removed through knowledge, the ego dissolves, and one realizes the ever-present self. If the ego arises from the self but forgets its source, this still doesn't make sense. How can something that doesn't exist somehow exist for itself? This sounds like someone is making the formless into an object. But the formless is what it is. It has no form, title, or label. Everything exists within it, and even saying that is too much, because it's already a label or a name. So who says the ego arises from the self? Did the self say it? And I know even calling it self is just another word. Your insight goes to the very heart of Advaita. To speak of the self and the ego as two entities is already a step into duality. The moment we speak of the formless, we begin to shape it, which is not possible. The formless call it Brahman, Atman, or neither is beyond name, form, and thought. Language fractures what is whole. From the standpoint of absolute truth, nothing arises. There is no ego, no world, no birth, no death, no seeker, no path, no liberation. This is the doctrine of non-origination, as Gaudapada declares. There is no dissolution, no birth, none in bondage, none aspiring for wisdom, no seeker of liberation, and none liberated. This is the ultimate truth. Why then speak of the ego arising from the self? Because from the empirical level, the one who believes they are bound must hear something that leads them inward. These metaphors, ego, arising, forgetting, are teaching tools, not ultimate truths. They are concessions for the sake of understanding. From the highest standpoint, there is only self unchanging, ever present, beyond even the thought of self. The self never said anything. It never declared, never thought. It is not a knower, not a doer. It simply is being, awareness, bliss sat sit, ananda, self-luminous, changeless. Even Ramana Maharshi, when asked about the ego, would ask back, to whom does this ego arise? Not as an answer, but as a pointer. Not to explain illusion, but to see through it. You are already that. Even to say, I am, is already one thought too many. In silence, it is already clear. Thank you for listening and for walking this path in your own way. Please support the channel if this resonated with you. Like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who may be seeking silence and abide as what they already are. You're also warmly invited to leave your thoughts or questions in the comments. If you would like to email, the email is learningandlivingwithramana@gmail.com. Remember, post your response to the reflective question. Until then, remain still, remain true, remain silent.